I've got walls up because I'm a guy, and that's a guy thing. That's something that we do. We know that culturally, what's expected of us is to not be as expressive with our emotions. Otherwise, we seem inconsistent and someone that can't be depended on. It's part of our gender that people expect of us to be consistent, to be decisive. And so, because of that, because that's how we're wired to be, that's part of our cultural identity and our gender as men, what happens by default, and I've experienced this more recently as I've evolved into more of this Han Solo character as compared to Luke Skywalker, from my late 20s to now my mid 30s, is ultimately by default what's happened is walls have been built. You know, before I could be more expressive and say how I felt without, worrying about what people think. But at the same time, I think I really did worry more about what people thought about me because I wanted to be this good, likable guy. And as I've gotten older, I don't care about people liking me because I've found a solid foundation with my family and I'm grounded in my life. I know what's going on. But ultimately what happens is, as I've emotionally matured, became more emotionally intelligent, walls have been built up. And I know that, and I'm aware of that. And when we say this, when we hear this, it has this negative connotation that, oh, he's a guy. That's what men do, is they have these walls built up and, nothing bothers them, sort of thing, right? But again, out of necessity, that's part of what our gender does. In fact, if we don't do a good job of it, then we're considered to be less than a man. Now, granted, you don't want to go full Neanderthal and, take in all your emotions and not let them out and then just explode one day, But obviously, when you're emotionally intelligent, you're right there in the middle. You can express emotions, but for the most part, you choose not to get too extreme, and that has something to do with those walls being built. It's out of necessity we're this way. Again, I can still express emotion. I've seen the Disney movie Inside Out twice, and I have no shame in admitting that at the end of it, I cried. Not because it's a sad movie, but just because it does a good job of expressing a parent's love for their child, their unconditional love. And that speaks to me, and for the rest of my life, as I watch that movie, I will always cry. It's a fact. Typically, nothing else makes me cry or gets me too emotional. That's just how I am. But I have a very good control over my emotions. I haven't cut off my emotions, but what I have done in building these walls is I've learned with people around me where to keep those walls. For example, and I've talked about this many times on my channel before, but I've got to the point where no one can hurt my feelings simply because I don't allow them to. I don't grant permission over my well-being, my emotions. I don't give power or authority over my emotions to another human being, no matter who that person is, because the moment I do, then I'm putting myself in a position where I can regularly be offended. I can regularly feel disrespected and belittled. But if you take that power away from other people by owning it yourself, that doesn't happen. And it's very effective, and my life is much better for it. However, as that happens, walls get built up to where I have such control over my emotions that I'm maybe not quite as dynamic as before. I'm maybe more straightforward. I'm more aware of what's going on. And yes, I see my cards, and I'm not letting you know what my cards are. That's an effective way of building the wall. So I don't see it as a bad thing for a man to have walls up. It's not even necessarily defense. It's a matter of staying in control of your own life. Because again, masculinity, one of the ways masculinity is defined is by being decisive and being confident in yourself. So if you're speaking exactly what you are thinking, what's emotionally going through your head, and it's coming out, that is not seen as masculine. It's not. Nor is it just to be like that either, right? There's a middle ground, and I feel in these last several years I've gotten to that point largely because I don't allow anyone to offend me anymore, because I recognize I have 100% control over that. The people only control that if I let them, and that's the only reason. So I'm here to say that I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to be a guy and have your walls up. I think it's a very necessary, important part of being an effective guy, a man that people can depend on and trust and respect ultimately. Because when I take myself in a time machine a decade ago, when I was in my mid-20s, I was probably a more likable person. I was probably more friendly, and I could chill out easier and things like that. So while I was more festive and exciting, at the same time, you had this sense, I guess you could call me being sensitive. I was more sensitive as a person too. So now I'm not personally sensitive, and I'm also not eager to prove that I'm a nice guy anymore. I think maybe I've got less to prove. I think because I'm so confident in my beliefs now, perfect example for me is, as you know, I'm a vegan, and there's not a lot of manly vegans in the world, and I recognize that. But I'm not here to convert anybody else. I don't care if anyone becomes a vegan because I'm so confident in my beliefs that I could care less if anybody else becomes a vegan. I don't care, Tommy Lee Jones and The Fugitive. So it speaks volumes about my comfort level, about confidence in myself, that I'm not trying to convince people of my beliefs. I'm secure in my beliefs, and that's a sign of my masculinity, and I understand that now. Whereas before, about a decade ago, whatever my beliefs were, I was trying to convince other people that this is the way to do it. And now, here's what I think. I know it works for me. I don't even care what you do. I'm not even gonna ask what you do. Whatever. I have enough to focus on in my life, things that actually I know that matter. So I'm feeling good. And again, I'm probably not as likable on the outside to the masses, but it doesn't matter, because I've come a long way in emotional intelligence. So I think it's all in how you look at it. But what I'm going to say is, to be effective, to be a masculine man, you do have to have walls up. You have to know how to recognize emotion, when to express it, which is, in my experience, very little of the time as far as any kind of dynamic emotion, because you want to be in control. So contrary to what pop culture might say, I say if you're a guy and you've got your walls up and you've got things balanced, I actually say that's a good thing. I'm Nick Shell, but what do I know?